You knew it was coming. Hi guys, so I'm here to talk about, gosh, I can't even imagine what it could be. But yeah, I just got out of Godzilla X Kong, Godzilla Cross Kong, Godzilla Times Kong, Godzilla Kong. First impression, I gotta hate that title. I just, I mean, it's whatever. It's like, I remember, I think I was complaining on Twitter, I know, oh, somebody's complaining on Twitter, who would have thought? But, I remember when, the rumor was it was going to be Godzilla and Kong, and I was like, that's dumb. And now I'm like, oh, I guess I could have called it Godzilla and Kong: The New Empire. And instead they did the X thing. It doesn't matter. That's not what the movie's about. So I just got out of the movie. I went with a bunch of friends to see it here in Austin. And I'm actually going to be doing a full review / impression video live stream with the folks from Laguna Studios. That is a little too loud. The folks from Laguna Studios and a couple other folks on Monday. It'll be part of Critical Affection, or is it Critical? I don't know. There'll be a live stream. I'll put a link in the description. My brain is kind of pudding after seeing the movie, because it really is a movie that kind of, like, I remember at the end of it feeling kind of overstimulated by the whole thing. And not necessarily a bad way, but there's not a lot of, like, downtime, And I know a lot of people are praising that aspect of it, and personally I thought, like, I could have used a little break at some point. So, to kind of catch people up, if you don't know, this is the 5th movie in the Monsterverse, which is funny because the Monsterverse started 10 years ago. It's 2024. The Monsterverse started in 2014, and it is definitely not, it's not like the Marvel Cinematic Universe where it's like a movie a year or 2 movies a year, however many movies they were doing at one point. But in between these films, there's been a bunch of ancillary media. There have been comics and TV shows and stuff kind of padding things out. And I personally think that's a perfectly fine approach. I've got Titanus Doug here, who is also in the movie, not to be a spoiler, but I think overall I liked it. I thought it was really fun. It definitely is. It could not be more of a polar opposite to Godzilla -1. And yet, we really do. In just a few months, we got the full spectrum of the Godzilla universe. We got -1, which is this deeply allegorical, and in some cases, nakedly one-to-one, it's about trauma, and it's about, and it's about being humanistic and being, and it's about empathy, and it's about working together, which I guess is a little bit what Godzilla X Kong is kind of about, but Godzilla X Kong is about that lizard and that monkey sure did fight that other lizard and monkey. I mean, I think there's been a lot of conjecture recently online about, like, how the Monsterverse doesn't, like, the movies aren't about anything. And I think that's mostly true. I talked about that on Twitter a little bit recently. Again, a damn fool thing to do. But the idea that these movies, like, are completely devoid of substance, and I would say that's not entirely true. I think these movies touch. You can't make something of this scale, or really, it's honestly hard to make a story or to make a narrative of any kind without some sort of thematic resonance with something that the people making it, are putting into it. It's why the notion of making a completely apolitical piece of art, something that has no politics in it, is almost impossible, because politics are a reflection of our concepts of morality, and if you don't, you know, you would basically be making a blank screen to make something that is completely devoid of meaning in some capacity, you know. There's even little bits in the movie about friggin' colonialism. I mean, it's very, like, it's just like a heartbeat, like, and that's fairly consistent for the MonsterVerse. You know, the movies have little things in them, but they rarely does the MonsterVerse movie have one big overarching consistent theme. The only MonsterVerse movie that has like a beginning to end, like, consistent solid theme is probably Skull Island, which is also the best. And yeah, the others, but with this one especially, they leaned, you know, Adam Wingard and the crew really leaned into just sheer spectacle. Personally, I think I slightly preferred the spectacle of, say, Godzilla versus Kong, simply because it was a little more focused, and I think it had a little more time to cook. This one felt a little more like they were throwing stuff at the wall, and it almost became clear to certain... I mean, I wouldn't be surprised... I mean, sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit, but I remembered reading a news item recently that this was the lowest budget MonsterVerse movie, and I actually can see that because, well, number one, there's a very small cast in this movie. Like, there's obviously lots of extras, but, like, the core cast of characters is very small. Again, it has that Godzilla versus Megalon vibe. That's probably the movie I'm going to keep coming back to when thinking about this. And as a result, you know, and there aren't like any really big actors in it. You know, you don't have nearly, you know, Skull Island had this giant all-star cast. And then in the Godzilla movies, you know, you had these almost like guest stars. You know, I'd say the biggest star in the last one was Millie Bobby Brown, and, you know, she's not in this one. I thought that and then so of course they're leaning way more on a monster stuff for this one, but as a result, it felt like the monster stuff wasn't as cleaned up. It wasn't as refined, and you know, it felt like maybe even they weren't bothering with as much rendering time. I'm not a visual effects guy, so I wouldn't really know. But I think it's also kind of a fallacy to be a Godzilla fan and to complain about special effects. You know, obviously we should have some standards, and there are certain things that just like, well, that's not. I don't like how that looks. But with this one, I felt like they were going for a clearly much more kind of over the top and cartoonish aesthetic, almost more fantasy sci-fi than necessarily, you know, what they were going for. Even in, you know, Godzilla King of the Monsters, which is, I wish I could go back to King of the Monsters, which, again, I have a soft spot for the movie. Some people really shit on that film. I don't personally think it really deserves some of the flack that it gets. I do think it's well within anyone's right to criticize creative decisions that they may not jive with, and I personally have been very critical of King of the Monsters for having a really not very good environmental theme. I think that the environmental themes in that movie are not very well thought out, because the movie is honestly not concerned with that. It's concerned with the monsters and the texture of the monsters, and I think there's some really good stuff in that movie. And I mean, of course, you know, between the soundtracks and some of the visuals, it's beautiful in some ways, but I want to go back to King of the Monsters. I want to, like, take an extra layer of atmospheric effects just off of the movie. Like, I want to take a squeegee to that movie and scrape a layer of atmospheric effects off of it. And of course, I fully advocate that Godzilla 2014 needs a complete re-release. I think that movie has been treated horribly by the home video department by being released way too dark, and I think it needs to be re-released, because it is that I've seen a version of the movie that has just somebody took the balances and just fixed them, and you can really appreciate a lot of those details that are completely lost in all the official releases. And I think that is offensive as an artist. I find that offensive. And with King of the Monsters, I feel like you can take that movie and kind of like take a squeegee to it. But there's still some really good visuals in that. I am not talking a lot about the actual film, about Godzilla X Kong. Again, it was clearly made with the intent of being a big world-building movie. Like, they really want to talk about the Hollow Earth. And I think it's a really cool idea. I have really kind of come around on the Hollow Earth. I remembered, like, hearing about it early on and thinking, that's a weird choice. But no, I actually like what some of the stuff they're doing with it, because they're just getting weird with it, and they're doing weird stuff, and they're tying things back to, like, the surface world. I'm sure they can do other stuff with it. Personally, I'd be okay if we went in a different direction. But I'll get to that in a second. I actually thought, like, just to talk about the humans for a minute, I thought the human characters, I thought they were great. You know, Kaylee Hoddle is rock solid, you know, as Gia. Again, you know, she's clearly grown up a lot in the last couple of years, and I like that they have this little arc with her. It's a very simple little arc. I think all the other human characters actually wound up being a lot more entertaining, specifically because they didn't dwell a lot on, you know, these kind of tiresome tropes, and instead just let their personalities rise to the surface. As opposed to something like -1, where we have a really tight story, we have a really tight set of character dynamics, and that's our focus. Whereas, you know, the intent from this going in is that it's going to be monster fights, and it's going to be like on borderline high fantasy, you know, high sci-fi fantasy, soft sci-fi, I guess. And so, as a result, you're probably not going to have as much patience for human drama stuff. But I felt like what was there was fine, perfectly serviceable. And the characters' personalities came to the surface. I was certain I was going to hate Bernie again, because I personally find him a little tiresome in the previous film. You know, the conspiracy theory character. But I liked him in this. I thought he was funny. And the other guy, Trapper, who's an identical white guy to the last movie's generic white guy. I thought this generic white guy was kind of fun. I actually liked him. Other quick thoughts. Obviously, you know, there's lots of monsters in this one. Like, more monsters than I think I expected. Like, a lot more. And, you know, stuff on, you know, on the Hollow Earth and on the surface. On the live stream, I'm definitely going to talk a bit about my thoughts on the Hollow Earth being not literally within the Earth, but being a parallel dimension that occupies the same space as our Earth. It just happens to be in a Dyson sphere. I'll talk about that on Monday. Stop looking at yourself, Matt. Look at the camera. It's hard, though, because, you know, your human brain is programmed to want to look at a human face, so that's why I keep looking at myself. Obviously, it's a very Kong-centric film because, let's be honest, Kong as a character is probably is much easier to write for, whereas Godzilla is more of a plot device. He certainly has had character turns in the past, but even in something like -1, you know, he's more of a plot device than he's something that drives the plot forward. Whereas with this, it's more like Godzilla is a supporting character, and again, Kong is the one with the pathos, Kong is the one with the arc. Godzilla is this wild card who, you know, is going to come in and do what he's going to do, and there's a lot of really fun stuff with both of them. You know, Kong gets this really fun adventure in the Hollow Earth, and Godzilla has a lot of really fun moments, but it's really clear that a lot of the focus is not on him. Which, again, it's like, what are you going to do? Like, I would like to see the next movie focus more on Godzilla. I think that would be cool. And they're definitely going to make a sequel. This thing has already made like $10 million just in the last day alone. And I think it's just in the States. I think it's I think it's probably going to crack 100 million before the weekend's out. Probably 200 million based on some estimates, and that's cool. You know, these movies. It can be argued that these movies pay for stuff like -1 and Shin Godzilla. They should be paying more for those movies, which is to say, you know, they should be paying those effects artists a lot more for winning them some damn Oscars. But yeah, I got a Hellhawk here. I got a Hellhawk. I got a Wart Dog. This is another Hollow Earth creature. I got a Heave. There were some people that are already being shitty about Suko, and I think that's incredibly stupid and juvenile. I thought he was fine. I thought he had some really fun little moments. And the whole crew I went with was immediately like, oh my god, I've pack bonded with this tiny ape. So I liked him. I thought he had some fun moments. And, you know, and Scar King has a lot of really cool, like, he is just a bastard in this movie, and I like him. I big Planet of the Apes vibes, like, without, you know, like, I don't feel like that's a controversial statement. I liked Shimo. I thought Shimo, I kind of wanted a little more of Shimo, and of course there's a big cameo in the movie that a lot of people are probably already aware of. I just hope we get some new ones. But yeah, I think that's about it. I think I've got all the thoughts I'm going to share today. Like I said, overall I liked it. The only problems I had with it really were that I wish it could have slowed down a little bit. And I had a slight cognitive dissonance with the fact that, man, a lot of people died in those battles. A lot of people died. And it makes it a little harder to cheer for these guys. And you could argue, in the older Godzilla movies, they're destroying all sorts of stuff, and it's like, true, but you can kind of separate your thoughts about people being obliterated in these cities because of the miniature effects. Or if the point is something like a Shin Godzilla or a -1, you know, then that's the point, is like, oh god, the carnage of it. But in this one, it's like, God, there's so much carnage, and these cities are being wiped off the map, and we're still supposed to be like kind of cheering for these, and it's all rendered in such intense detail that you're like, I don't know about this, guys. I don't know if these are supposed to be the heroes we need. But I mean, I guess if you just want to completely disassociate that from your brain, then whatever. It's very visually cool, and I like the Battle Roar Godzilla Playmates toy is definitely the better of the 6-inch Playmates. Although I'm gonna get those Bandai the Bandai ones too. I'm curious to see how they do Scar King and Shimo. But anyway, yeah, so check back on Monday. I'll be sharing the link out, and thanks. I just have to figure out how to turn this off.